I want to thank you all for joining us this evening to talk about money and the money that we can get for kids from colleges primarily. So Michelle is running the slide deck for me. Thank you, Michelle. She is one of our college counselors and our office manager. The other members of our team are Denise and Jake, but I'm going to be doing this one tonight with Michelle. And I'd also like to welcome Mariah, who is doing Spanish translation for us. If you would like Spanish interpretation, there's an interpretation channel that you can click, and that will take you to where Mariah is. We're going to be recording, and so we will send out a recording and the whole slide deck, which means you don't have to take notes at warp speed while I talk through this. There's a lot of detail, so it might be easier to just listen, and then we'll send out the slide deck. We'll have some time for questions at the very end. We'll let everybody unmute themselves and just try our best not to talk over each other. We'll see how that works. And so I'd like to see the next slide now, please. That's a list of how you can find us all and our emails. And next slide, please. I always like to start with noting our office values. Choices, that means we want all the students to have a choice, a whole bunch of choices, ideally, at the very end of the process. Choices where they will thrive and find the things that are most important to them and to their family in the list of things that they prefer and need in a college. And that includes financial fit, which is why we do this presentation. Second and third are self-awareness and self-worth. That's referring to the students, but guess what? It could also refer a bit to their parents. I'm a parent myself. I've got 2 kids who have now gone through the process, and there's a lot about who we are sometimes that gets into the process. And it's really good to think primarily about our children, but as an adult and a parent, I know that that's hard. But for us as college counselors, we are interested in helping the students develop their self-awareness and their sense of self-worth. They are not their college acceptances. They are not their test scores. They are not their transcripts. They are each their very own human beings with good things to contribute to the world. And this process that they'll go through is a time for finding that. And finally, autonomy, student autonomy. We want the students to be comfortable doing as much of the process as they are able, and for parents to be comfortable with letting them do that. So typically in our slide decks, we have these different rectangles at the bottoms of the slides. I've put autonomy at the bottom of many of the slides and left others blank because they're really not so much about the students. But there are many things in this process of paying for college that students actually can be in charge of and take care of. And so those are marked with the little blue rectangle at the bottom. Next slide deck, please. So here's our agenda. We're going to talk about need-based aid, merit-based aid. Those are both things that you don't have to pay back. Student and parent loans, we'll spend a little bit of time on that. Also the Federal Work Study Program, which you may or may not have heard of. The 2 financial aid applications that people usually have to do, FAFSA and the CSS profile, and then a brief look at the timeline. It's much less complicated than the timeline for applying to college. There are really only 2 dates on it, which is lovely. Next slide, please. So I want to start with a disclaimer, a caveat. None of us college counselors are trained as financial advisors. And so that means that you may have questions and bring them to us, but we are not probably going to try to answer them if they are complicated or individual specific. We just don't have that kind of knowledge, and we don't want to present ourselves in such a way that would make you think that you can trust our judgment with that, because we are not people who do that for a living. So your best resource for that kind of question, should my family do X? How should we take care of using our money and investing it and whatever? All that stuff is good stuff to ask to your financial advisor or your accountant if you have one. And there's also a really good resource in the college financial aid office for each college. College financial aid officers know this stuff backwards and forwards, and they can help you. They are your go-to person for questions about who needs to file what kind of aid your child will get, what it means if you check a certain box, all of that sort of thing. And they are there to help you. Next slide, please. So there are three kinds of money: the kind that has to be repaid, the kind that you don't have to repay, and the kind that you earn. And I just said you, but look down there at the bottom of the slide. You means the student. So this one has the autonomy rectangle. For money that they don't need to pay back, and I'm probably going to flip back and forth from you and they, but I'm going to be talking about the students on this slide mostly. Grants, that's what we call need-based. Maybe you'd call it scholarship money from a generation or two ago. But typically today, if we say a grant, it's a need-based amount of money. Scholarships tend to be merit-based. But I have heard people say that they got a scholarship that was need-based. So that one is kind of, it goes both ways. Money you do have to pay back, of course, is student loans. I didn't put parent loans on there because the students don't pay those back typically, but also because this is their education. And if they are judicious and careful and have their loans in their own names, that's part of being an adult. It's part of building credit. It's part of being a responsible student, and using money that you know you're going to have to pay back has a different gravitas to it than using somebody else's money that they don't have to pay back. Then there's money you earn. So many of our students are familiar with the summer job, sometimes the term time job. So that's true in college also. The jobs can be on or off campus, both for summer jobs and for school year jobs. Some students, particularly after they've finished like sophomore year, they will stay on campus and work doing admissions tours or working in a lab or doing research for a professor, stuff like that. Federal Work Study is a federally funded program where students who are eligible, and this is on the basis of FAFSA, so it's by income, can have an on-campus job or a job at a nonprofit. Those are available all 12 months of the year, and the job eligibility is determined each year when the family fills out FAFSA. Those can be really, terrific jobs in an area that the student is excited to work in, or they can be the kind of jobs that, you punch the clock, you do something responsible. Maybe it's not work you love, but you're getting paid for it. And it can be a nice respite from studying and activities, because maybe that's the kind of job you want. So when I was in college, I had work study jobs, shelving books in the library, checking IDs as people entered the dorms. But I also had a wonderful job at Seattle Opera over the summers, where I got to play piano as a studio accompanist. And so I got to do both, the kind of job where you can sort of chill out and the kind of job where you do something that's relevant to what you want to do after you leave college. So moving right along. Next slide deck. Merit-based scholarships, money you don't have to pay back. These are scholarships given to students because the college or university wants that particular student. They align with institutional priorities. So perhaps the college is looking for someone who is an artist or is deeply engaged with drama, someone who does a lot of community service in their high school years and is likely to continue that in college, someone who shows leadership, academic talent, that comes from a transcript often, and sometimes it's even a matrix sort of thing. Some colleges say, if you have X GPA, you will get this amount of money automatically. Sometimes test scores appear in that matrix too, so it'd be a combination of test score and academic grades. National Merit is an example of a merit-based scholarship that comes from the PSAT or the alternate path, and I can talk about that a little bit later if people have questions. That's an interesting thing because there are colleges that stack on top of the very modest National Merit Award, which is about 2,000 or 2,500. But some colleges really want to get those kids that have national merit, and they will pay pretty much full ride. They are colleges, state universities, and privates that really want to build that contingent. If you're interested in which colleges those are, talk to your college counselor. There's not a whole lot of them, and they don't turn up on most people's first draft of their list. One of the reasons for that is that these merit-based scholarships, being incentives to enrollment, are not coming from the most prestigious colleges. The most prestigious colleges don't need to entice kids to come. So they are very unlikely to offer merit awards. For example, there are no merit awards to any of the Ivies. Merit scholarships are usually awarded for 4 years, and they're renewable. There seems to be an urban myth out there that I hear every once in a while from parents. Well, what if my kid gets a really nice merit scholarship and then the college yanks it after the first year, kind of a bait and switch? That's not really a thing, although there are conditions for a student to renew a merit scholarship of any type. Those can be a GPA, you have to maintain a 2.5 or a 3.0, or participation in an activity. So for example, there are colleges that offer music scholarships, and in order to have one, you don't have to be a music major, but you have to play in the orchestra or the band or something like that. There are some merit scholarships that are tied to a particular major, and so you have to keep the major in order to keep the scholarship. Most merit scholarships are awarded without a separate application. It's the student's application for admission is what's considered, and an offer of merit scholarship would be made at the time of admission without a separate application. That's not always true, though, and it's always a good idea for students to check their college website to see what the details are. That's one of the reasons autonomy is down there in the bottom of the slide. And I already spoke about GPA and test score matrix for automatic awards. Those happen at many public universities and also some privates. Next slide, please. A lot of people have heard about things like the Frito-Lay scholarship and the Toyota scholarship and the Coca-Cola scholarship. There are some private scholarships out there that are a very large amount of money, and they usually give 1 or 2 of those every year. It's very, very, very hard to get those. The big institutional money comes from colleges, and there are some private resources, though, that are more likely to give kids small scholarships that are not the big Frito-Lay, Toyota, Coca-Cola ones, but they're more local. So parents' employers sometimes offer scholarships to their employees' children. Religious organizations often do. I know there are many synagogues, for example, that give a couple $1,000s each year if a student agrees to take particular academic courses in language or Jewish studies, something like that. Cultural groups often do the same thing. If you take a course in the history of whatever group this is, or in their target language, you might be able to be eligible for a few $1,000 scholarship. Various interest-based groups. When I first started college counseling, I used to get paper mail from a ham radio club that gave scholarships to kids all over the country. They were $1,000. It's not a huge amount of money, but it's out there. There's also health-based groups. So things like multiple sclerosis, epilepsy, cystic fibrosis, all of those groups offer scholarships to people with that particular condition. And so if that applies, reach out to those groups and see what their process is for getting money. You won't get huge amounts of money from these, but every little bit helps, of course. I call it, the book money and the pizza money and the ice cream money. But those are all important sources of money that take a lot of time if you want to get them, and they're only worth it if it's worth it for you to get those kinds of amounts, 1,000, 2,000, maybe up to 5,000. Okay, Next slide, please. So what do you do to get money? Well, you have to fill out a bunch of paperwork. And I am fond of telling students, when your parents fill out the FAFSA and the CSS profile, the other one, which will be on the next slide, do something really nice for them for a really long time. These are considerable work. Even the FAFSA, which has been simplified, it takes time and it's not a huge amount of fun. FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. It's required for need-based aid everywhere in the US. That includes community colleges, four-year colleges, and graduate schools. Students have to submit it every year. It's the student's application, not the parents. And that's a really interesting thing. So when you do this, you have to be careful of minding the pronouns. Okay. Most of the time it's parents doing FAFSA for their child, but the questions are addressed to the child. So you have to be careful. Anyway, FAFSA uses prior year information that comes directly from the IRS, from your 1040 tax return. So for parents in the graduating high school class of 2025, you would use your 2023 IRS 1040. So that means it's already done when your child is applying for college, and you don't have to wait until January to get all your tax documents. FAFSA determines whether your student is eligible for federal student aid that includes grants, loans, and that federal work-study program that I was talking about. So the grants and the loans are both distributed typically by the college itself. Federal work-study is also run by the college itself because they're the ones usually doing the hiring. Those funds are given to colleges in lumps. And if you apply too late, those lump sums will be depleted. So colleges do have deadlines. And then if you apply after that, you're less likely to get money. When you do the FAFSA, for those of you who have been through this before, they used to have a thing called the EFC, the Expected Family Contribution. That was an amount that the family was supposed to contribute, just as the name suggests. Now there's a different thing that they're calling it. It's the Student Aid Index. So the new FAFSA has not come out yet. So this is the first year. I'm not sure what that looks like, but it's, I think, not a flat amount. Here's what you must pay. It's probably some sort of index number that colleges use to determine how much aid you're eligible for at their place. There's a federal student aid estimator tool that you can, that's a live link when you get the slide deck. If you go there, it will ask you for some very basic financial information. It's not the full FAFSA, but it will give you an idea, a ballpark figure of how much aid your student might be able to get. FAFSA usually opens every October 1st. And so a family of seniors, or of a senior, would fill it out as quickly as possible on October 1st. So for the seniors this year, they would be using their 2022 tax return. This year, though, FAFSA has undergone a lot of changes. It's been simplified. It is late to roll out. We do not know the exact date. We have not seen the thing. That's why I'm not entirely sure what exactly the student aid index is going to look like. Congress is charged with making sure that the new FAFSA comes out by the end of December. So various college counselors around the land are laying bets as to what date it will come out, but it will be out by the end of December. And then there will be a rush to complete it because colleges still need that information. Usually by February 15th, they may push those dates out a little bit because of the late rollout this year. Here's the thing to know, though. FAFSA is free. The first F in that stands for free application for federal student aid. There are lots of sites online that will do the FAFSA for you if you give them your information, and they charge you for it. Do not use those. The FAFSA title up here is a live link, And so it's actually, if you just want to write it down too and keep it, it's studentaid.gov. Do not use a FAFSA site that does not have .gov in it. Next slide, please. Okay, so this application is different from the FAFSA. It is not free, sadly, but it's required for need-based aid and sometimes also merit-based aid at many colleges in the US. And the list is growing. There are a few more participating colleges this year because of the late rollout of FAFSA. So you can click on that live link, list of CSS participating colleges. It gives you all the colleges that use it for domestic and for international students. For, I think there's a column for merit or just for need-based. The details are there though. CSS Profile uses 2 years of tax returns, and in some cases they go back further than that. It depends on what your circumstances are. It's more in-depth than the FAFSA. So the FAFSA is kind of a blunt instrument for determining who's eligible for federal aid. CSS Profile is used by colleges who want to know more about your situation. And usually they say the information you provide in CSS Profile is going to get you more financial aid and merit scholarships than what would come if it was just the FAFSA. So that's why they want it. The other thing that the CSS Profile does that's particularly important with the new FAFSA coming out is that the CSS has always collected information on how many children in the family will be in college. FAFSA in its new incarnation, the one that's coming out by the end of December, no longer will ask that question. So that puts the burden on the family to communicate with the college and say, hey, look, we have 2 or 3 or 4 kids in college, because FAFSA is not going to tell the college that. So colleges will likely take that information into consideration if they know it, but they're not going to get it from the FAFSA. CSS Profile opens typically on October 1st each year. This year, just because I think they wanted to point out to FAFSA how much classier they are, they opened a couple of weeks early. So the FAFSA has been around now for almost a month. Or sorry, the CSS Profile has been around now for almost a month. It is not free. It costs $25 to file it and $16 per report. You have to send a report to each college that requires it. So you don't want to pay for colleges that don't require it, obviously. Fee waivers are available when you fill out the initial income information on the CSS Profile. It will tell you whether you're eligible for a fee waiver or not, and students can also fill out an application for the fee waiver for that, and they can get those from their college counselor. Next slide, please. So this is too many letters, but families usually want to know, do I have to do just the FAFSA, or do I have to do the FAFSA plus the CSS? Any kind of need-based aid, you have to do the FAFSA. So really the question is, do I also have to do the CSS? So the way to check that is to go to the individual college's website or to click on that live link from the slide just before this one to see who participates in the CSS. If they participate in the CSS, they also are going to require the FAFSA. But they vary. There's no, rule of thumb. I can't say all the privates are the ones doing CSS because now it's also a lot of publics. So you just have to do your research. And here's another thing. Some colleges, rather than use CSS, which is a very long document, they have their own supplemental financial aid form that's shorter than CSS, but longer than FAFSA. The only way to do this is to figure out from the college's website what they require, and it's going to change from year to year. Some colleges do have additional requirements for situations of divorce, custodial, non-custodial parents. Those also vary from college to college, whether they require a non-custodial parent to fill out the CSS or the FAFSA. So again, you have to go to the college website to find out what they do. And the financial aid offices are really super good about talking parents through this, and happy to do that so that you get as much financial aid as you're entitled to. Fall of senior year is the time to do that research and figure out what's required by the colleges that your senior is applying to. Next slide, please. Oh, and I put autonomy there because the student really can do that. We show the kids how to use the college websites, and they are perfectly capable of going and looking at the financial aid page and making a spreadsheet for you with the information so that you don't have to do it yourself. So here's the financial aid timeline. And like I promised, there are only 2 deadlines. The first one is October, and FAFSA has already missed that deadline, but it will be out before the end of the year. I put the live link for the CSS participating colleges there again. Deadlines for submission vary. So you submit FAFSA, you put it on your FAFSA application. This is going to colleges XYZ. You do the same with the CSS. Usually those deadlines are no later than February 15th. But the recommendation is to submit your CSS and your FAFSA as early as possible because institutional funding is limited. That's particularly true for merit scholarships. If your student is applying ED or EA, it's a really good idea to do the CSS profile before the deadline for submission of the student's application, or as quickly thereafter as you can, if the college requires the CSS. For FAFSA this year, since it isn't available, colleges are gathering what information they can from CSS and making a provisional estimate of what the financial aid package would look like after they receive your FAFSA. So for ED acceptances that come with a financial aid package, they will wait to confirm that until they have your FAFSA, and you would have additional time to confirm your attendance. Usually financial aid packages and merit scholarships come either right at the same time as an offer of admission or within a few days. So if you don't get one and you were expecting to get a merit scholarship, it's likely that there wasn't one coming. But it never hurts to be in touch with the college and ask. That includes ED admission, with the exception of seniors this year because of the late rollout of FAFSA. But if you have applied for financial aid and you're a senior and you're applying ED, you will have extra time and you will be expected to submit your FAFSA as quickly as possible after it becomes available. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give a few resources here to help you figure things out. You already saw the student aid index estimator on the FAFSA slide. Here's another thing that each college is required by federal law to have a net price calculator on their website. It's an estimator. It's not a thing to get a financial aid offer, just an estimator, ballpark. You put basic financial aid or financial information for your family into it. And sometimes colleges that give merit awards will also ask questions about GPA, maybe test scores, maybe certain activities that the student intends to pursue in college. This is anonymous, so you don't need to worry about jeopardizing your child's application for admission by the fact that you filled out a net price calculator. What it estimates is what you can expect to pay after they have dispersed need-based aid and merit-based aid if they give that. Different colleges use different algorithms for doing these, for running their NPCs. So it's a good idea to do them for different types of schools, like say a state public, a large private, a small private, large and small state public, also out-of-state publics. Just do a few of them and see what your estimated costs of attendance would be. Another resource for estimating costs is, this is a live link, My Intuition. So this is like a net price calculator, except that it has member colleges that are all using the same algorithm. And many of them are private. I think it's about 30. I think there might be 1 or 2 publics on it. But it's all the same algorithms, so it would work the same way if your child was applying to any of the colleges that use My Intuition there. Next slide, please. Okay, there are some important terms that parents need to know. Students know these. We go over these in college seminar with them. The first one that's very attractive is meets 100% of demonstrated need. Now that means need that is according to the FAFSA. You have to demonstrate by doing the FAFSA how much you need. Now the thing is, most families' demonstrated need according to FAFSA is much less than what the family thinks they need. Nevertheless, there are some colleges that meet 100% of demonstrated need according to FAFSA. And they meet it through grants, through loans, through a term time or summer job, through federal work study. Some universities, a very small number, now meet 100% of demonstrated need only with grants. So that's money you don't have to pay back. Those are very wealthy and very highly rejective universities, but they want to make it possible for all the students they admit to actually enroll. There are some that say no loans if your family income is below a certain threshold, and that threshold varies from university to university. Need blind is another really important word in this whole thing. This means that the college is blind according to whether you applied to or for financial aid or not. And they don't consider your financial need when they're deciding whether to admit you. And you, of course, is the student here. So the way that works is that if the student checked a box on the Common App that says, yes, I'm applying for financial aid or for need-based aid, that would not be seen by a need-blind college until after they've admitted the student. Then they would see, oh, do they need financial aid or not? And if the answer is yes, they do need aid, the file would go up to financial aid and an aid package would be built for that student because they've already been admitted. So need blind means they don't consider your financial situation in the admissions process. Need sensitive, otherwise known as need aware, is the other side of that. They do consider financial need as part of the admission process. That feels scary a little bit. And I want to reassure people that it doesn't actually come into play all that often. The estimate is that it affects about 2% of kids' college applications, and think about how many they apply to. So what's going on with that is, suppose there are a bunch of students who are all fairly similar in GPA, activities, they would all be a good fit for the college, but maybe they're not high in the pool of applicants. They're marginal for admission, but they would all do well there for sure. If the college has limited financial funding for students to give away, or none, they are going to obviously choose a student who can pay full price. And that's hard. It's a good thing for students to understand whether the colleges they're applying to are need sensitive, need aware, or whether they're need blind, and to use that difference as part of the way they construct their list to have balance in the number of need blind and need aware colleges. And we can help them do that if we know that that's an issue for your family. Here's the thing, need blind doesn't necessarily mean that they meet 100% of demonstrated need, nor the vice versa. Those two things don't have to go together, although for some colleges in the United States, they do. Need blind and meets 100% of demonstrated need describes many of the Ivies, for example. So when a college says they're need blind, but they don't meet 100% of demonstrated need, here's what can happen. It's called gapping. It's when a college gives some financial aid, but doesn't meet 100% of demonstrated need. Colleges that gap sometimes are need blind, and sometimes, more often, in fact, are not. So they are looking at your family's financial situation when your child applies to college, and they may give you your child some good financial aid, but it doesn't meet everything, and it may leave the family with, for example, $20,000 or $30,000 to come up with or more, outside of the student loans, outside of the work study, outside of the scholarship or the grant, or both. Autonomy is on that one too, because students know these terms and they are charged with being sensitive to their parents' situation and being able to talk with us about that so that we can help them find colleges that will be a good financial fit as well as a good fit in other ways. Next slide, please. So what if the FAFSA student aid index and the NP net price calculators that you do are just alarming for the adults as well as for kids, but usually the adults are alarmed first. I see this happen a lot. One of the first things to do is to let your child's college counselor know that you have done this research and that this is alarming. I had a parent come in one day and say to me, I just did the NPC for my kid's favorite college, and it just about gave me a heart attack. I don't know where I'm supposed to get that kind of money. If that happens, don't just sit on it and worry. Please let us know and we can help. Here are some of the things that we'll consider together with you. Figuring out which in-state publics are a good fit. Thinking about, we're lucky in California because we're a member of WUI. 160 Western states colleges are involved in the undergraduate exchange. So they're charging less tuition for students who come from California than they would for a student who comes from Wisconsin, for example. So we always would look at the California publics and we'd look at the WUI colleges. We would also help you identify generous private colleges, the ones that give merit scholarships. Merit scholarships can range from a small amount to things like $20,000, $30,000, or $40,000 off of sticker price. If you attended the Smart Track webinar a couple of weeks ago, generous colleges was mentioned a lot. Here's a thing to know about those, which I alluded to a few slides ago. They don't tend to be the colleges that are most prestigious and that everybody gravitates towards first. You have to really expand your knowledge of what your student is looking for and what other colleges offer those things besides the ones that you've heard of. That can be hard, but that's okay. We're here to help. So we want parents in this situation to keep an open mind. Honors programs at state universities, particularly some of the out-of-state universities, are eager to have students like ours who are high achieving, ready to go, college prepared, and would add a lot to their communities. They may not be the ones that you would instantly think of when you think of sending your student to an out-of-state public, but there are some good deals out there. So let us know if you're interested in that and we can steer you in the right direction. As a parent, I recommend having honest conversations with your child early on so that they know what financial good fit is going to mean for you. When there are loans that parents take out in their own name, that means that you're paying somehow, and that comes out of your retirement and your well-being, and kids need to know that. So have those honest conversations if you can, for sure. And do let your child's college counselor know if need-based aid and merit scholarships will be important for your family. Okay, moving along. Some advice. I seem to be missing the slide about loans. Did I do that and not even remember it? That's okay. How about I'll give some advice and then I'll talk about the loans, okay? The college financial aid office or a resource for you. They're happy to talk with parents, unlike admissions office. This is a big deal. Admissions officers want to talk with your kids. Don't call up and ask them questions on behalf of your kids. But financial aid offices know that it's much better to talk with parents because they actually understand what's going on that way. They can use the big words of finance with you guys. So be happy to talk with, they're happy to talk with you, and they will get all kinds of resources together for you if you need extra support in figuring out what to do. Second thing I mentioned before was expand your idea of what constitutes a good college, in quotation marks. There are so many out there, so many colleges that are generous. I had a student several years ago, I'm not going to name the college, but if somebody asked me privately, I'd be happy to share. He was aiming for the sort of place that everybody's always heard of, National Merit Kid. He got an email from a college that he knew nothing about, and at the time I knew nothing about, in a faraway state that he had never contemplated going to. And he sent them some information about his financial situation, and he sent them an application. And before they even got the FAFSA for him, they said, if you get your FAFSA in here quickly, we think we can give you pretty close to a full ride. He got it in, he got a full ride. He had a great time. He went to graduate school. He stayed in that state. He's got a terrific career, and his younger brothers and sisters all went there too. The family had never heard of this place. It did well by him. A couple of other websites you might want to check out, FastWeb and Big Future. These have free scholarship search tools so that you can put in certain things that you're looking for, activities the child does, grade point average, test scores, place where the student wants to go to college, whether it's merit awards or need-based aid or both that you need, that sort of thing. So both of those are really big databases and good places to look. Michelle, I think the next one is questions, right? Yeah, okay. I'm going to go back because I think somehow the slide dropped out about student loans, and I do have a few things to say about that. So eligibility for student loans is determined by FAFSA.
Ya, sí, yo tengo una pregunta. Esto quiere decir que ya podemos empezar a llenar lo que es este FAFSA. Y lo que vamos a necesitar son los taxes del año anterior, ¿cierto? Del 2022.
I'm hearing translation, and I'm sorry, I don't speak Spanish.
Porque dice octubre primero.
Hey, Michelle, can you help? Okay, I'm going to speak about student loans for a second here. The student loans that we're talking about are government-based student loans. That means that they are federally insured, and the way students get them is either subsidized or unsubsidized if they're eligible for a federal student loan. Subsidized means that the federal government will pay the interest while the student is in school, and that includes if you go back to graduate school. They'll start paying the interest again for you until you graduate. Unsubsidized loans, the interest starts to accrue as soon as the student takes out the loan, which is basically the first day of school. And then the interest accrues throughout their 4 years of college, and they have to start paying that back right away. The federal government puts a cap on student loans. They don't want anybody taking out so much student loan that they are not going to be able to function as independent adults. So the amount in total for 4 years right now is at $31,500, I believe, for all 4 years, not $31,000 for a single year. The rule of thumb that college counselors share with students and their parents is if you need to take out more loans than those federally insured loans, do not take out more indebtedness in 4 years than you would be able to make in your first year's salary. Now, that doesn't mean we expect kids to go and move in with their parents and sleep in the basement and give all their earnings from their first job to pay off their student loan. That's not what this is about. It's more like when you go to rent an apartment, they say, you know, you have to have 4 times the amount of rent as your monthly income, or we won't rent to you. It's a rule of thumb. Similarly with mortgages, there's a ratio of debt to, you know, what your salary is or what your resources are. So a student shouldn't, for example, take out $100,000 in loans total over 4 years if they are probably going to be in an entry-level job as a graduate that maybe is making $30,000 to $40,000. That's why the federal government caps the loans at 31.5, because that tends to be the average right now college graduate salary. So even if you're planning to have your kid get an excellent job with 6 figures as an engineer, they're still going to have that maximum federal loan. Plus loans are for parents. Those are, you know, private loans that you can get through your banks. Those have a higher interest rate, and obviously they're your loans rather than your child's loan. So I just always caution families to be careful. There's almost always a cheaper way to do this if you're willing to think outside of a narrow box. Okay. So the next slide is our last one. Thank you. I know that was a lot of information real fast, and I'd like to open it to questions. So you are all free to unmute yourselves and just try not to talk over one another. Michelle, you can stop sharing the screen. Thank you. And so just jump in if you have a question. And like I said, caveat is I can't answer personal and really complicated stuff. What, no questions? How could that be? Michelle, has everybody given an, oh, I see everybody's muted.
I think people can unmute themselves if they would like and speak up if there are any questions.
Okay. So I should just assume that everyone understands all this stuff? Wow. Okay. Either that or I bored everyone to tears. All right. Well, how about this? If you have questions and you have and your child has an assigned college counselor, reach out to them. If your child does not have an assigned college counselor, reach out to me. If you have a general question that you just want to run by me, that's fine too. And we will be sending out the recording of this and the slides, and I'll make sure that that slide with the loan information goes on there.
Lynn, actually, we do have a question coming from the Spanish channel.
Okay.
And the question is if they know when they're going to be able to fill out the FAFSA. Like, do we have a specific date? Is the FAFSA available in Spanish? Do you know any information about that?
Yes. Okay. So the FAFSA is available in Spanish. I believe the CSS is also, but I would have to check on that. And the CSS profile is out already. The FAFSA is the one that is running late. It is every year it's supposed to be October 1st, but this year the government has done a overhaul of FAFSA. They have made a lot of changes and they're not ready. By law, they have to have it available to families no later than December 31st. But we may all be waiting that long. They have not announced a date. It's driving college counselors, colleges, and families crazy. I am so sorry to have to say that news. When I find out that FAFSA is open, I will send out an email blast right away to all those seniors and their parents. Other questions? All right, well, I think I'll close up shop then and say good evening to everyone. Please do reach out to me or to your child's college counselor if you have questions. We're always happy to answer. And thank